In California, they're testing automated cars. Now, this, for the most part, is probably going to be introduced first through truckers, because truckers have to go from point A to point B with this large freight. And if you can have an automated car doing that job, you don't have to have a person who gets blue and tired and lonely and cold and miss their girlfriend and get a little randy and all of these other things that plague us just in being human beings. Those automated cars are going to be able to go from point A to point B without a driver. And within the next 15 years, it is going to get less and less frequent that you see a person behind the wheel of that large truck on the highway. This is going to take place because just the capitalistic incentive for it to take place. It will move to Ubers, it will move to taxis, and eventually it will move to your car. And in 50 years or so, it will be a rare bird to see anybody behind the wheel of a car. And we will marvel at those cowboys that were driving, meaning us, behind cars in traffic and on the highway. The same thing will happen to stores. And meaning Amazon testing out where you walk into a store and it would automatically charge your card when you pick up the item to leave. And you can even see it in the stores now, like, the Walmarts, the Targets, the grocery stores where you walk in and many of the checkout counters are no longer there. And there's a robot, essentially, that takes your information with one person, ensuring that everything is all right. In Europe, many of the checkout counters for McDonald's were automated. And even in the United States, you see those things to be automated. That process of automation will be more and more prolific as our society goes on. This is not a problem of technology, by the way. This is a problem of the point of view of the society itself and the sluggishness of the society to make adjustments for the best interests of the society. Instead of using technology for the best interests of us all, we use it for the best interests and the profit of the 1%. That is a viewpoint issue. That is not an issue with the technology itself. Oftentimes, technology competes with human beings, and that technology essentially gets rid of jobs that those human beings were doing, in which case we get kind of antsy from the standpoint of technology. But again, the issue is not the technology. The issue is the workable point of view of the society that allows the 1% to benefit magnificently off of that technology, while we, the rest of the population, while we get to use it, no, not necessarily benefiting in the same way that the top 1% benefits off of those resources. Of everybody in the race, regardless of all of his flaws, and I would say he has many, especially from the standpoint of foreign policy, Andrew Yang talks about this probably better than anyone else. This is his wheelhouse. This is the thing to which he has essentially made his mantle. We need to deal with our capitalistic system, especially the gains that people have been able to make, the top 1%, using technological development. And that technology will get rid of more jobs and, under Yang's terms, eventually create a crisis point. I agree with Yang on this. Technological unemployment is a real thing. There will always be jobs, don't misunderstand me, but many of the jobs, especially good paying jobs, gets bled off just based on the incentives of trying to get rid of those jobs to cut down costs. The moment that you start paying people $15 an hour and you can get a burger flipping machine for $14.95, they will get rid of that job and save that nickel. The moment that you can ship a job overseas, they will ship that job overseas to save that nickel in a heartbeat. Again, this is an issue in the focal point of society that allows the top 1% to benefit magnificently off of technological innovation while the rest of us pays for it, or at the very least don't get to use the benefits of it in the same way with regards to the way the wealth is distributed due to the technology. Tim Pool was in an argument with Sam Cedar, and he tries to make this weird argument about utilitarianism that was Thanos was an idiot. Thanos is not an argument for utilitarianism, because Thanos could have used those gloves to ensure that each and every person had food, clothing, shelter, all these things. He had absolute control over space, matter, and time, and his decision was to get rid of half of the population. He was a creature of his environment. And because he was a creature of his environment, he never grew beyond that particular environment, not to mention a bit depraved, unless not all that empathetic. That was his choice. That is not an example of utilitarianism. I'm sorry. It's a side point. I'm sorry. My point is, of all the people on the stage, Yang talks about capitalism as a system, less of religion, even though he still has that religious aspect of the capitalistic system. And again, for all of his faults, because whatever Yang is talking about, giving people $1,000, that in no way allows people to get control of the means of production, which if you really want to move your society forward is where you need to start. And this notion of technological innovation and using technology and all of those things. If workers had control of the means of production, that technology would not be used to attack those workers. The workers would be able to benefit from that technology. Giving them $1,000 a month doesn't necessarily deal with that particular issue. But at the very least, he discusses this and he talks about it, and he talks about it competently. So it was weird, strange even, that when Yang is asked by Washington Post, who on the debate stage is he closest to? And who would you consider being in their administration? Who do you think he brings up? Who do you think he brings up? Joe Biden. Vice President Yang under a Joe Biden administration. Yang's not against it. I thought this answer was so weird. But nevertheless, Yang is not necessarily a traditional candidate, and so his perspectives kind of go across the board. But when Yang was asked, who would you get into an administration with, he picks Biden. And I have to be honest, I can't see in 1,000 years that Biden would ever be on board for the UBI thing. But let's hear Yang talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back often, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. Yeah, the Tim Pool thing was a tangent. For some reason, I have that in one of my video lists where Pool was in a debate with Cedar. And Pool is trying to make this argument about utilitarianism and this one concentration camp less thing. And he's using Thanos as an example. It was such a weird and bizarre example that didn't quite apply, even though his basic point was right. He just had a horrible argument to try to make the point. This is Yang talking to the Washington Post. And listen to the guy's question and listen to Yang's response. Who do you find yourself closest to on the debate stage? And beyond that point, who would you consider being in an administration with? I found this answer fascinating, especially since, again, in 1,000 years, I couldn't see Biden implementing the UBI thing. And that's Yang's signature donation to this argument, the debate. Not just that, the technological unemployment, but the UBI thing. And I have to be honest, despite having a conversation with Biden about it, I don't necessarily know if Biden would be on board for any of the plans that Yang is talking about, especially the UBI one. Let's hear him.
I'm a parent, I'm a patriot, I just want to help solve the problems of this era. I believe I can do that best as president, but if that's in some other capacity, I'll be there.
Who on that debate stage is closest to you in terms of your view of the world? Who is closest to you in that sense?
It's funny you ask that. I mean, you'd have to sort of put us all together in some kind of Franken candidate.
No, there must be someone in spirit who's perhaps closest to you.
I will say the only person who's taken me aside and said that we need to really worry about the fourth industrial revolution because it could potentially tear our country apart is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden pulled you aside. That's an intriguing. Would you serve on a Biden ticket? You said you were open to anything?
I'm definitely open to working with Joe. We've actually talked about it.
So that's Andrew Yang joining us for Post Live.
Yang has been talking about Biden, serving with Biden. I found this interesting. And working with him is not the same thing as necessarily serving him. But let's hear it again. The guy asked the question, would you be willing to serve on a Biden ticket? His answer
Like
was
Franken candidate.
No, there must be someone in spirit who's perhaps closest to you.
I will say the only person who's taken me aside and said that we need to really worry about the fourth industrial revolution because it could potentially tear our country apart is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden pulled you aside. That's an intriguing. Would you serve on a Biden ticket? You said you were open to anything?
I'm definitely open to working with Joe. We've actually talked about it.
So that's Andrew Yang joining us for Post
interesting.
Live.
I am fascinated by this. And, to be fair, even though it seems weird, I mean, if you're thinking about it in a raw political sense, if your name is Andrew Yang and you're made vice president under a Biden ticket, even though you're not going to necessarily get your stuff through, Biden may give you certain responsibilities as vice president that may allow you to get something that you want done. You will get introduced to the political climate in Washington, so you would get experience, and you would be one step away from the presidency of a man that seems to be falling down mentally on the job. Yes, you would be essentially subjugated by what the president wants. By the same token, you're a heartbeat away, a 78-year-old heartbeat away from the presidency. I think the weird part here is who is the closest to you on that debate stage. Now, to be fair to Yang never answered that. He just said, Biden pulled me aside to talk about the fourth industrial revolution and it could tear our country apart, and we talked about working together. He never really answered the question who's closest to on the stage. I guess you can implicitly say Biden, but that just means that these guys had some kind of communication and talks. That doesn't necessarily mean he's closest to. Yang is an odd duck on that debate stage. And I got to be honest, I have no idea who he's closest to on that stage. But at the very least, he's open to serving in a Biden administration. Biden Yang, 2020. Like, share, subscribe. I don't know how this is going to go down with the Yang gang. They may not necessarily care about this. And like I said, there are benefits, there are positives to being one heartbeat away, one 78-year-old man's heartbeat away from the presidency if your name is Andrew Yang. But I'm curious about what the Yang gang thinks about this. He's not my guy. I find all sorts of flaws in Yang. But there are a lot of people who are dedicated to Yang and his campaign. And I'm curious about what they think about this. They may not care at all. They may say, oh, dude, don't do that. Or they may think, hey, what's the downside? Yes, you're not necessarily going to get your will, but by the same token, you will be in a prime position to run after Biden's term is over. Like, share, subscribe. This was such an odd answer.